Shalom, giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Wh0re. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations, as always, to the elect. Another episode going into news and prophecy, linking the things that are happening throughout the whole entire planet Earth to biblical prophecy, to show the faithful elect, the remnant, that the words of Yahweh Bashim Shai are faithful and true as we sing this new song, chatting down Babylon the Great, all right, to those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, all right. Condemnation to Esau, Edom, and the heathen nations, also condemnation to 2/3 of our own people who don't want to hearken, all right, and who are pulling their shoulders away, all right, from the arm of the Most High God, Yahweh, through Yahweh Shai, through the Holy Spirit, through the prophets that have been sent to give understanding, all right, on all of these things that are happening throughout the whole entire planet Earth, all right, and the Holy Scriptures, all right, set themselves apart from any other philosophy, all right, any other ideology, any other so-called religion on this earth. And what one of the major things that sets it apart, all right, is the prophecies. And we can go into the prophecies and link them to everything that are happening today. As a matter of fact, as we have all of these ideologies boasting themselves up against the scriptures, this is the book of Isaiah 41 and 21, all right? Produce your cause, saith Yahweh, bring forth your strong reasons, saith the King of Jacob, all right, which is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let them bring them forth and show us what shall happen. Let them show the former things what they be, that we may consider them and know the latter end of them, or declare the things to come. All right. And no other philosophy, no other God, all right, does it the way that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob does it. Let's read this in the NLT. All right. It says, let them try to tell us what happened long ago, so that we may consider the evidence. Or let them tell us what the future holds, so we can know what's going to happen, all right? And none of these other philosophies do that, okay? It says, verse 23, show the things that are come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods. Yea, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed and behold it together, okay? Buddha, Allah, none of these, false idols are speaking, all right, as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yahweh, Bahasham, in the name of Yahweh Shai, the name of the only begotten Son of the Most High, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, or speaking, all right, Bahasham, in the name of Wh0re, the Holy Spirit, or the Spirit Holy, that has been sent, okay? And as it says here, Isaiah 41 and 21, produce your cause, saith Yahweh, bring forth your strong reasons, saith the King of Jacob. All right. And that's ultimately the challenge as you look at all of these philosophies, even Christianity, that have reigned supreme, over the years. They're now, all right, gearing their whole, religion towards, pestering the Hebrew Israelites. They're not going into prophecy. They're not, using this book to separate the believers from this current world, which is getting ready to go into perdition, destruction. Okay. Everybody's playing games with the Lord. All right. Set up a certain amount of men, all right, who are of the 144,000 to come and sing this new song in these latter days. All right. And what we're finding out, all right, what we found out, verse 24, all right, behold, ye are of nothing, and your work of naught. An abomination is he that chooseth you, speaking to all of these various different gods and idols, okay, that have these big names, all right, but now that it's getting down to the nitty gritty, All right, it is the servants of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, all right, that are being set apart with the true message, the true testimony, which is going to lead to a righteous kingdom being set up. All right, so as you saw, I had on the screen today, we're going to get into the, news of the beast hating the whore, all right, which the beast system we know is, America, NATO, the EU, all right, which a lot of these European countries in these latter days, all right, are turning an evil eye towards Babylon in preparation, all right, to ultimately join alliance with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and so forth, okay, to ultimately shoot missiles and decimate this place, all right, as it is written in Holy Scriptures. This is off of CNN.com. Analysis: whether it's Trump or Biden, some in Europe see the U.S. as an unreliable ally. All right, and we'll read a little bit of this article. We'll get some videos and some scriptures, and hopefully you be edified, because that's the purpose of these videos. When Joe Biden confirmed he will run for re-election this week, Americans, European allies knew exactly what that meant for the future, all right, of the transatlantic relationship, which is the beast system, okay? It is no secret that as news broke that Biden won the presidency in 2020, leaders across the pond were relieved that a more conventional Democratic leader would be in the White House, all right? But they also knew that Biden would not be able to undo all the damage done in Donald Trump's 4 years, all right? Because during Donald Trump's reign, he put a sour taste in the mouth of a lot of the European Union leaders, okay? Pretty much his mindset was, we have to make America great again. Okay, all of these nations need to, be putting in the pot, all right, for the benefit of Babylon. Okay, talking crazy to the leaders, talking crazy, all right, and, I remember, the president of the EU told Trump, you need to be careful how you talk to your allies because you don't have many. Okay, and then comes, Joe Biden, all right, which the sour taste hasn't left. It's only gotten worse as these countries are now waking up to the fact that this war over in, Russia with Ukraine is a money grab for Babylon. And we'll get into that as well. Okay, it says Trump was a chaotic leader. And we know that there's a lot of propaganda on CNN when it comes to Trump. All right. But the sentiment that we're bringing out here is that these European nations are tired of Babylon, which is biblical prophecy. Right. It says they also know that Biden. It says Trump was a chaotic leader who repeatedly criticized America's European allies. And that's true. He threatened trade wars on everything from cheese to airplanes. He questioned the principles of NATO's alliance and sniped at the European Union at one point, saying that if he ran the UK, all right, which is exited the EU, the Brexit, says he simply wouldn't pay the 520 billion pounds, I believe, all right, Brexit bill that Britain legally owed the EU. There are two main reasons why Europeans haven't entirely moved on from the Trump era. First, if Trump could happen once, there is no reason he or someone in his mold won't happen again. Second, Biden, Europeans believe, has continued much of Trump's foreign policy, all right, and protectionism on trade or maximum pressure on China. These two realities will influence European approach to America and its place in the world order for at least the next decade. When you speak to European diplomats and officials, the word trust comes up often. Trust not just in the intentions of the U.S. as an ally, but trust in American democracy. All right. As the book of Jeremiah, the 51st chapter says, let's get that. Jeremiah, the 51st chapter, and the 7th verse says this: Babylon have been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Okay, and a big part of that wine is democracy. Okay, which is, undermining and using witchcraft, okay, to gain control of nations under the false sense, all right, of freedom and choice. So the nations are mad. Okay, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed, and we're going to get into how in prophecy, all right, that would happen. All right, because a big part of that is these European nations turning their back on Babylon. All right, leaving Babylon isolated. How for her, take balm for her, if so she may be healed. All right, and this place isn't going to be healed. As you can see, it's getting significantly worse. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her. All right, let us go, everyone, into his own country. Okay, and that's happening literally as you have, people, come over here to get rich, and they're realizing that this place is going down the drain, and they're literally going back to their own countries. And you have these different countries, all right, starting to look out for their own benefit, as joining the beast system has only really benefited Babylon the Great, which is the modern day Roman Empire, along with its vassals, all right, subordinate states, all right, which the EU fulfills that, the 10 horns. So for her judgment reacheth unto heaven and is lifted up even unto the skies. All right, her sins have reached unto the heavens. All right. It says, we look at what happened on January 6th and wonder if we can trust something similar or worse won't happen again. Collapsing the political system with it, we look at the division in the country and wonder if we can trust that the U.S. won't double down, all right, on its protectionist America First agenda. Okay. And as the scriptures say, America will be more stout than his fellows. Let's get that real quick in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. Daniel, the 7th chapter, and around the 20th verse, it says, in the 10 horns that were in his head, and the 10 horns represents the vassal, subordinate countries that were allied with the ancient Roman Empire. Today that is fulfilled, all right, in the European Union. Okay, it started out as 10, but it spread to around close to 28, I believe, as they have more power. It says, in the 10 horns which were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even the horn that had eyes. And this is going into the history of how America came about, in the Revolutionary Wars. The 3 that fell are the Spanish, the French, and the British. All right, and the horn that had eyes is speaking of Babylon the Great. All right, all you have to do is go up in this chapter, and it goes into that. All right, because the 4th beast, which would be Rome, all right, would have a little horn extended from it, which is the revival of Rome. All right, and the eyes represent the fact that he's merely a man, but he's boasting in this science, all right, that is supposed to ultimately take over, all right, and hijack the creation of the Most High. And a mouth that spake very great things. You see that? Pseudoscience, whose look was more stout than his fellows, okay? and that's Babylon the Great. His look is more stout than his fellows. Okay, and a lot of his fellows, his counterparts, his allies, aren't taken too kind to that. All right, Ra'ab or Rab or Rabbah, great captain chief, and America is the chief of this whole beast system. All right, and a lot of these countries that have allied themselves with America in these latter days, all right, are now starting to see, all right, this America first approach is not working out for their economy, especially with those sanctions that were put on these European countries by Europe, all right, which were pushed by the Biden administration, which is leaving these European, economies, all right, to collapse, which is a, controlled collapse. That's what they want, all right. But as you can see here in this article, these EU countries are saying we can't afford to be overly reliant on an ally that we cannot trust, all right, will be stable, they added. This lack of trust and general suspicion of America has in part driven what is referred to in Europe as a strategic autonomy agenda, essentially to attempt for the EU to have an independent foreign policy that makes it less dependent on the U.S. A key part of that agenda is Europe maintaining close economic ties with China. That would be unacceptable to both major American parties, all right, these days. So whether it's a Democrat or a Republic that gets in, all right, they're going to have a problem with European countries keeping close ties with China, which opens up, ties with Russia and these various different nations, even the BRICS nations, as we have an article here. Okay. Europe might get ready to accept the BRICS currency, and we'll get into that. All right, which will, take away power from, all right, the petrodollar, the US dollar. Okay, let's go back here. So, let's see here. French President Emmanuel Macron explained his vision for strategic autonomy in somewhat clunky terms recently when he told Politico that Europe must not become just America's followers on China. The comment was controversial because it was said in response to a question about what Europe would do if China invaded Taiwan. But broadly speaking, all 27 EU member states support the strategic autonomy agenda, albeit with varying degrees of hawkishness on China thrown in for good measure. The truth is that European concerns over America have made even some of the biggest China skeptics in the EU accept that Europe must now take a different approach to Beijing from Washington. That doesn't mean that all EU nations are happy about this new reality. Some, especially in the east of the bloc, fear that the lure of Chinese markets and cheap labor blinds their peers to the risk of being too economically reliant on China. All right, you can keep reading this, but you get the mindset, okay? And as you can see here, all right, NATO allies to abandon U.S., even NATO countries are in talks to abandon the U.S., okay? We know that Erdogan, all right, was reelected in Turkey, and we know his mindset towards Babylon the Great as, all right, Turkey, all right, is the biggest military power, all right, or one of the biggest military powers of NATO, all right, but Erdogan, all right, has a very, very, very evil eye towards America. He's always suspecting them of doing evil. Okay. And that earthquake that happened not too long ago, all right, all right, they know what that was all about, as they were causing friction, all right, between, I forget the country or two countries that were trying to join, all right, NATO. And they were opposing it. And then all of a sudden you had this big earthquake, all right. But Erdogan, all right, was reelected. Okay, and we know he has an evil eye towards America. All you got to do is type it in. Let's just real quick see here. We can just go to Google. Let's go to Google real quick. Yeah, see, Turkey's Erdogan says need to teach America a lesson after U.S. envoys meet, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, so even, in the elections, it was to teach America a lesson. All right, Erdogan says Russia displays resistance against the West. Yeah. And it's a whole bunch of stuff. But over the years, this Turkey, this president has, been very, very outspoken against Babylon the Great. All right. So him being reelected, all right, can only mean in the future, okay, we may see Turkey, all right, flip and join hand in hand with Russia, all right, which, that was a big, that was a big problem with NATO, because remember, NATO was created to ultimately oppose, the USSR and Russia and China and so forth. All right, so that's something to be on the lookout for. All right, as this particular president, Erdogan, has been reelected. Now, going back here, see here. Yeah, and after that intel leak, all right, dealing with Ukraine, all right, a lot of NATO and EU, allies are looking sideways at America. Let's check this out.
The U.S. headline.
Here to discuss Eurasia Group President Ian Bremmer. Ian, what do investors need to know about all of the weekend's events here with regard to China?
They need to know that the news that was dominating the U.S. headlines, which is the McCarthy and congressional meeting with Taiwan's president in California, was probably the least important diplomatic news that was coming out of China over the past week. As you've mentioned, it's the Saudi and Iranian foreign ministers now meeting together for the first time in Beijing. It's the former Taiwanese president finishing off a 2-week trip to China, the first time since the Civil War ended in 1949 that any sitting or former Taiwanese leader has visited the mainland. And of course, it's the French president, as well as Ursula von der Leyen, traveling to Beijing, and Macron in particular, publicly on the back of that trip, saying that the Europeans need to diminish their dependence on the United States, saying no such thing about China, while of course France wants to do a lot more business there. So, I mean, really a lot of news coming out of China these days, and not necessarily what's being picked up or driving headlines in the U.S.
And you're suggesting good news for China, net, and it's
well, sure. I mean, China has all sorts of domestic, demographic, and economic challenges, but from a diplomatic perspective, Xi Jinping is leaning into global influence, and he's finding a lot of people that are very willing to take him up on it. And that's not in Trump's America First land. This is with Biden as the U.S. president. Not a lot of people were expecting that, certainly not inside the administration. That's what's happening right now.
A lot of people, I mean, politically, a lot of the opponents, the Republicans, are blaming Biden for all of this that's happening right now, saying he's losing the narrative and he's losing control on the world stage and he's losing the U.S. dollar, the reserve currency, because of everything that's happening here.
Well, he's not losing any influence of the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. That's exactly where it was 10 years ago. So there's nothing there, and CNBC knows that very well. But more broadly, it is true that the U.S. has a lot less influence in the Middle East today than it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Some of that is the Biden administration having a really challenged set of relations with, for example, the Saudis, with the Emiratis. Some of it is the U.S. under Trump unilaterally pulling out of the Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA. But definitely the Chinese see a vacuum. They're leaning in. And the relationship with France, frankly, is probably the least trusted of the U.S. relations with G7 allies, and the way that AUKUS, the submarine deal, was mishandled by the U.S. diplomatically probably didn't do any favors for that relationship.
I was going to say, I mean, it's been interesting to watch it erode the relationship regarding the Inflation Reduction Act, and now this idea, I guess, I mean, is it really, is it part and parcel of our relationship with France over time, or is any of this related to the pressure that Macron is under back home?
Oh, there's surely the fact that Macron feels like a lot of things he's tried has failed. Remember, Macron was the one leader that was going out, meeting with Putin when other leaders refused to. It got nowhere, but he gave it a shot. He wanted to be the guy that was making that deal happen. He recently made a trip to Africa. It was a disaster for him, sort of end of Francophonie in Afrique. It was back home, it was reported very badly. And of course, you've got all of these demonstrations, significant and significantly violent, even in the context of what France routinely experiences. So he clearly is frustrated at home, but he still sees himself as the leader of Europe. And the fact that he made this trip to China with Ursula von der Leyen in tow, that the Chinese government treated him very well, much better than they treated von der Leyen, it would have been one of the more significant and successful trips that Macron had if he had just stayed quiet about it. But he couldn't help.
All right, let's get the book of Obadiah. And we'll jump to verse 6. It says, "How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up?" See, and that's happening via the prophets exposing him. Remember, the book of 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, said he will be revealed in his time. Okay, so that's why we're living in a time where it is now clear who the Edomites are, and that talking point of who them being the Edomites, and all of the lies that they've used to forward their beast system are being swallowed up, because it's over for these devils, man. All the men of thy confederacy, okay, and we always look this word up, okay, this word confederacy, all right, Barayath, okay, and covenant, all right, alliance, pledge, treaty, alliance, league, and so forth, all right? And that's what the European Union was. Okay, it was an alliance, which ultimately that brought back, all right, the spirit of the ancient Roman Empire. All you have to do is look up a map of the European Union countries, and you'll clearly see that that's Rome all over again. Okay, what's been added, of course, Babylon the Great, okay, which is the modern day Rome. Okay, and then you have, Canada, and so forth, which, NATO and the EU is that beast system. Okay, and America is at the forefront of it all. So all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. All right, and that bread is that debt. Okay, there is none understanding in him. All right, so speaking of France, all right, they are one of the European countries that is ready, all right, to accept the BRICS currency, all right, as we see this article here, all right. Europe might get ready to accept BRICS currency. A whirlwind of changes is taking place in the global financial markets. All right, so the men that were at peace with the alliance that you once had is now being broken. All right, which that is biblical prophecy, and that's what we're going to get into in this lesson. That's what we are getting into. It says a whirlwind of changes is taking place in the global financial markets, threatening the superiority of the U.S. dollar. Now, again, in order for the dollar to break, it's going to take a catastrophic event. But the mindset of it all is what we're, witnessing, because it's tied to biblical prophecy. A handful of countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe are looking to end reliance on the U.S. dollar and promote BRICS, all right, or their native currencies. Iraq banned the U.S. dollar in May, posing a hefty fine term and jail term for anyone trading in with the USD. You see that? So again, we just saw in this prophecy, all right, that they that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee, and the bread is tied to that debt. All right, the scriptures talks about in the book of Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter. Okay, in the 6th verse it says, shall not all these take a parable against him? And we're witnessing that parable that these nations are taking against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth in that which is not his. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. All right. And the Hebrew word for thick clay, all right, is ibatyet. All right. Ibatyet. All right. Weight of pledges, heavy debts. All right. And you know, aligning yourself with that U.S. dollar, all right, is ultimately aligning yourself with mass debt, what makes you reliant on Babylon the Great. Now, you do get a lot of, victories with that. But as the world is changing, these nations, okay, are starting to see dependency on U.S. is not the future, because it's prophecy. Okay, now, yeah, in Iraq, all right, said to hell with the U.S. dollar. All right. Now, France to join BRICS. This changes everything. This is off of Cyrus Jansen. Pretty good information. Let's see if we can make the playback speed a little faster.
Countries around the world have been following the lead of one superpower, the United States, but the world has changed significantly in recent years. The pandemic came and showed us just how interconnected our global supply chains are. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it showed us how even sanctioning just one country can have devastating effects on the entire world economy. Today, our world is multipolar. New alliances are being formed, global reserve currencies are changing, and if there's one certainty for the future, it's that no one wants to be single-handedly controlled by the United States. The BRICS alliance is gaining much momentum and is quickly becoming the key economic partnership that will change the future of our global landscape.
See, nobody wants to be single-handedly controlled by the United States.
Around 40% of the world currently lives in one of the 5 BRICS countries. The combined GDP of the BRICS alliance is already over $26 trillion. But the most fascinating part of BRICS is its next phase, global expansion. And if the latest headline comes true, it will be a shock to many Americans. One of our closest European allies is rumored to become the first European country to join the BRICS alliance. French President Macron has expressed interest in attending the upcoming BRICS summit, which is scheduled to take place in Durban, South Africa in late August. But how did France get here? And will they actually become the first EU member to join BRICS? If you've been following the moves of the French government the past few months, there have been some interesting trends that certainly seem to indicate the French alliance with the United States may not be as strong as the White House would like. The first event came in March of this year when France settled an LNG gas trade with China by using Chinese yuan instead of the US dollar. It might not sound like a major deal, but it was the first time a European ally sidelined the dollar and chose China's currency for cross-border transactions. The deal wasn't small either, as France purchased 65,000 tons of LNG gas and recorded the first yuan-settled trade through the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange. The next event from the French government sent shockwaves through the United States, when Macron personally visited Beijing and said the following: Europe cannot blindly follow the United States' lead and should avoid getting dragged into crises that are not our own.
See that? Europe cannot blindly follow the United States' lead and should avoid getting dragged into crises that are not our own. Okay?
This comment, of course, refers to the ongoing battle between the US and China over Taiwan, but also extends to other important issues, including the dollar debt crisis. Macron called for Europe to resist the pressures of becoming American followers and end reliance on the US dollar for trade. Now, when you look back at the French purchase of natural gas in Chinese yuan, one can see the bigger picture. Many analysts are also expecting Saudi Arabia to join the BRICS alliance, and its addition would all but solidify the BRICS alliance as the key energy and commodity producers in the world. As we know, the Saudis control the world's supply to oil, and over the years, their relationship with China has grown closer and closer. China is the Saudis' top trading partner and largest buyer of oil, and as this CNBC report from earlier this week indicates, Saudi Arabia and China are are part of a multipolar world order, and their mutual interests are strong and rising. The Saudi Minister of Investment stated in a recent interview that the Saudi kingdom is now part of this new multipolar world, and the Saudis' relationships with the United States and China are not mutually exclusive. The post-Cold War period saw the United States exist as the preeminent world power, the strongest force on the planet in terms of economic, military, and geopolitical might. But the rise of China and other BRICS nations, as well as anger in many parts of the world over US-led wars and sanction campaigns, led to increasing calls for a world order in which power was more widely distributed amongst different nations. This is
where we are. Okay? Let's rewind that part just a little bit.
Exist as the preeminent world power, the strongest force on the planet in terms of economic, military, and geopolitical might. But the rise of China and other BRICS nations, as well as anger in many parts of the world over US-led wars and sanction campaigns, led to increasing calls for a world order in which power was more widely distributed amongst different nations. This is where...
See, and the USSR is getting back in that old Soviet spirit as well. That has a lot to do with this all. Okay? Forget what I was going to get. Give me 1 second.
Where we are in 2023, and this is the future of our world. In fact, when the 15th BRICS Summit takes place this summer, the biggest question to be answered will be how many new countries will be allowed to join BRICS. According to Anil Sobel, South Africa's ambassador to BRICS, the organization has received requests from countries in Asia, Latin America, and Europe to join BRICS. Sobel went on to state, "We believe that cooperation is important, given the high level of interest from countries around the world. This shows that a large number of countries have faith and confidence in BRICS." In this Newsweek article entitled, "BRICS is evolving from China-Russia dream to potential US nightmare," we learn exactly why countries around the world are having this faith and confidence in BRICS. The main drivers are to do with an overall belief that the United States has become both unreliable and overbearing in its foreign policy. In recent weeks, the dominating storyline in the U.S.
Boom. Let's get the book of, it came back to me, Revelation, the 11th chapter. Revelation 11 and 18, and the nations were angry. See? Why are the nations angry? We just read it earlier. Okay, Jeremiah, the 51st chapter, where Babylon, all right, the wine of Babylon, which a big part of that wine, all right, is democracy, but this dollar is a big part of committing fornication with the whore, taking on that dollar. Okay, so this has led to the nations being angry. Okay, and as they're getting ready to establish their new, or their NWO, all right, they want things to be on a more even playing field. They're fighting for particular, strategic positions, and we're gonna have this. You shouldn't have that. We don't have to listen to you no more. Again, America, Babylon the Great's look is more stout than his fellows. Okay, and they're tired of his ass, leading them into these many conflicts and wars, leading them into these different sanctions being put on these European countries. They're like, what the hell do we have to keep dealing with this guy for? As the scriptures say, travel not with a bold fellow. America's that bold fellow, and his allies are tired of going out with him. He's leading them to all of these different conflicts, and a lot of these nations are finding out that thing in Ukraine is to benefit Babylon. There's a lot of evil wickedness going on with that. So the nations were angry, and thy wrath has come, all right, and the time of the dead that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and to them that fear thy name, small and great, which it shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. The end of Esau's world. Okay, and this is where, we are. The nations are angry, and wrath is getting ready to come, all right, on the earth, man.
US was the debt ceiling, and if the US government would default on its debt. Thankfully, Republicans and Democrats were able to reach an agreement to avoid this disaster, but in fact, they only pushed it back until 2025. Other issues that are causing countries around the world to lose this confidence is America's reliance on economic sanctions, punishing countries it doesn't agree with by taking them off the SWIFT banking system, and even using the G7 alliance as an economic gain to justify whatever actions the US government wants to do around the world. The last quote from this article is a hard pill for American politicians to swallow. Numerous global leaders from Africa, Latin America, Central Asia, and the Middle East, as well as China and Russia, have stopped believing in the United States as a responsible global leader. And according to Newsroom, there are now more than 30 countries who want to join BRICS. Just look at this map highlighting the current BRICS members in red. And remember, those countries already account for 40% of the world's population, but the new countries in orange could be a complete game changer for the BRICS alliance. Most notably are the Middle Eastern countries of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Mix in Kazakhstan, Egypt, and Algeria, and this new belt of countries through Africa and the Middle East will significantly increase the BRICS network's access to some of the world's most precious resources and minerals. But more on that.
In Saudi Arabia, was is a U.S. ally. So again, it's all happening according to what prophecy said would happen. Okay, Jeremiah 50:23. How is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How is Babylon become a desolation among the nations? I have laid a snare for thee, all right, and thou art also taken, O Babylon, and thou was not aware. It's the same snare we read about in the book of Obadiah, that these different nations who were allied with Babylon are laying for her. Thou art found and also caught, because thou hast striven against Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. The Lord have opened his armory and have brought forth his weapons, the weapons of his indignation, for the work of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai in the land of the Chaldeans. Come against her from the uttermost border. Open her storehouses, cast her up as heaps, and destroy her utterly. Let nothing be left. And this is what this is all going to lead to. All of these nations are going to eventually, okay, join forces, all right, and destroy this place. So we'll go into that in just a minute.
In a minute, BRICS is also looking to add Indonesia, the world's fourth most populous country, as well as Argentina, another country who, like France, is doing more international transactions in Chinese yuan. Just last week, we saw Argentina renew its currency swap line with China and the amount it can access to near $10 billion. And here is what happens next. If accepted, the new proposed BRICS members would create an entity with a GDP 30% larger than that of the United States. It would contain over 50% of the world's population and be in control of 60% of the global gas reserves. And this is where the future battle between BRICS and the G7 will be exponentially important in the years to come. The US and its allies control the world's financial systems, but the BRICS nations control the commodities like oil, gas, lithium, and other resources that our global economy depends on. Whoever controls the essential minerals of the world controls the balance of power in the world. And this is why America was so dominant with the petrodollar. But times are changing, and this is where a market opportunity presents itself, and I'd like to share with you the sponsor of today's video, who is tied directly to North America's need for lithium and precious metals. The company...
Yeah, you can do all that. Let's just get here, see if we...
or in proximity to existing discoveries and deposits. Once again, the stock ticker is LOMEF, and let me tell you why I've personally added this company to my investing portfolio and why you should do your own leader of this company, and do they have the vision?
All right. BRICS is growing. France is the first European country to join. All right, she's not saying anything no different than what he was saying. This is off of Redacted. All right, NATO Admits goal, kill as many Russians as possible, which that's all Babylon. Okay? This is terrorism. Okay?
We'll put out some food and water for your cat, for your war, but we don't own the cat. We don't own your war. It's not our cat. We're just here to help. That's literally what NATO is doing right now. Of course, all of this is a lie, revealed in the Pentagon leaks a short time ago, that in addition to training Ukrainian soldiers...
And after those Pentagon leaks, a lot of these European countries are starting to look sideways at America. All right, NATO, you know, it's happening. It's happening right in our time.
On tanks and weapon systems and intelligence and targeting and all of that, they've offered, NATO has offered detailed intelligence support, tens of billions worth of advanced weaponry. And to top it all off, NATO is calling the shots on just about every missile that's fired. Every offensive move that Ukraine puts on is all run through NATO. Not to mention all the countries from NATO that have their boots on the ground, their special operations forces who are actively in Ukraine. Even though they lied to us about that, but they're there. There are a lot of them that are there. But we're also getting new revelations that NATO specifically told Ukraine to kill as many Russians as possible. Their words, their directive. This was revealed in a new article in Foreign Affairs.
Yeah, but in the Western media, you know, Russia is being looked at as the bad guy. Well, none of this would happen had NATO not tried to add an ally, all right, in Ukraine, which would give them what? All right, an ally right in the front yard of Russia, which, of course, Russia was going to respond to that. All right, but the whole, you know, narrative has been Russia's this big bad guy, you know, which all of them are the devil. All right, but we know Babylon the Great and NATO, all right, has their hands in this. All right, as you see, you know, even in this article here, you know, Europe accuses the U.S. of what? Profiting from war. All right, EU officials attack Joe Biden over sky-high gas prices, weapon sales, all right, and trade as Vladimir Putin's war threatens to destroy Western unity. So all right, these nations are woke to what's really happening, you know.
Magazine. Now, remember, Foreign Affairs is a neoconservative, pro-war supporting rag by the military-industrial complex.
Yes, they are. I was watching a foreign affairs reporter on the Colbert Report from 10 years ago, just last night. Did you see what I was watching last night as we went to bed? So what that was the, his name starts with a G, and he was on the Colbert Report and basically joking about how after the Sochi Olympics, Barack Obama was playing this sort of game, like, you take all the medals, we'll take Ukraine while you're not looking, while you're busy with those Olympics. And they were treating it as if it was a funny joke. Like, Ukraine, has been aligned with Russia for a long time. The United States wants to sort of lure them away, like, hey, come away from your boyfriend and be with us. He literally made a joke about this. 10 years ago, we were being warned how capricious the West was about this conflict. I'm going to bring this video next week because it's crazy. But
But Foreign Affairs. Yeah,
Yes.
Just a mouthpiece of the neoconservatives, mouthpiece of the pro-war movement. So when you read, and they try to be like very erudite. It's a thick book. It's like, oh, when you're reading a Foreign Affairs magazine, it's like the size of a telephone book. You should really feel intelligent when you're reading Foreign Affairs. That's what they want to. That's what they want to put across. That this is only the Washington elite read Foreign Affairs magazine, which again is a mouthpiece of the deep state and the military-industrial complex. So we are getting these details from Foreign Affairs magazine, neoconservative rag. So for this to appear in Foreign Affairs magazine, Ukraine's winnable war is the headline. Why the West should help Kiev retake all its territory. The article is titled that. Of course, the crux of the article centers around the West supplying endless supply of advanced weapon systems, intelligence, special operations forces, training, personnel, all of it, the full infrastructure. The most stunning part of the article, though, came in an interview piece. Ukraine Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov, who told Foreign Policy magazine in what did I say? Foreign Affairs? Yeah, Foreign Affairs magazine in this interview that he was told by NATO to, quote, kill as many Russians as possible, even if Ukraine doesn't get all the weapons it wants.
So that basically makes it a kamikaze mission, right?
Yeah.
You may not have the weapons to do it, but die trying.
Yeah. We have asked, can we have Stingers, he said in the interview published on Tuesday. We were told no. Dig trenches and kill as many Russians as you can before it's over, if it's over. Reznikov boasted, Ukraine has been given Bradleys, Strykers, Abrams, Leopards, and more, and will soon be equipped with American-made F-16 fighter jets, boasting. And now, by the way, they're asking for
trenches?
Yeah, dig trenches.
And this is why America is known as the hammer of the earth, Babylon. NATO has gotten away with so many war crimes, but we're living in a time where this is the end of their ill dealings. Now, let's get the book, all right, of Daniel, the 2nd chapter, all right. Rome, all right, Daniel 2:40, Rome, which we know Rome was the 4th beast in that vision that Daniel saw in Daniel the 7th chapter. And he broke this down for the king here. Daniel 2:40, and the 4th kingdom shall be as strong as iron. The 4th kingdom is Rome. For as much as iron break in pieces, it subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh in pieces, it shall break in pieces and bruise. Now, what was Esau blessed with? The sword, okay? And we know the dragon, the red dragon, is what gave this beast system its power and authority, Rome, okay? The Greeks were a major power, all right, but it was Rome that ultimately gave them their dominance, all right? More territory, like they really stamped their name into the earth, and that sword was at the forefront of that, which is the same thing today, okay? Because this system will be revived into the earth, all right? This system of Rome, as we know, fell. The Western Roman Empire, the pagan Roman Empire fell, all right? But the deadly wound was healed pursuant to the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter, okay? And ultimately, this is where they're going to go into perdition, okay? Through what? The revival of Rome. Daniel 2:41, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of the potter's clay and part iron, the kingdom shall be divided, okay? But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, all right? For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. Okay, so the 10 toes, the toes are the end of the beast. Okay, it ultimately is part clay and part iron, which iron and clay don't mix. And this goes into, all right, how they still have the strength of the sword, the iron, all right, but it's what? Partly clay in a sense that what? They don't agree economically. They don't agree socially. They don't agree on a lot of things. All right. But they still have the power of the sword, which that's going to be divided and turned on its own head. Okay. So there's going to be the strength of the iron, for as much thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. All right. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Let's look up this Hebrew word for broken. I think I've looked it up before. But thabar, to break in pieces. Okay. Shabar, to break in pieces. Rend violently. And that's how ultimately they're going to be what? Destroyed through being divided from the inside out. And that's happening right before our eyes. Okay? So it's partly strong, but it's partly broken. All right? And that broken aspect, all right, the Lord's going to use these various different nations, as we'll show you in Revelation 17, to eventually turn completely on America and destroy her. That's all being set up through these things we're looking at. This is the importance of prophecy. Whereas thou sawest, okay, the iron mixed with the miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, okay, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So they've made all of these alliances, okay, through marriages. They've spread themselves amongst these different nations, sent economic hitmen, overthrown governments, force particular leaders to sell out. They did all that they've done. All right. They've made these different agreements, but we're living in a time where they're not cleaving one to another. They had this alliance. They had this, what we read in the book of Obadiah. All right. Damn, I can't think of the word. What does it say in Obadiah? Give me 1 second. Yeah, the confederacy. All right, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee, and they're laying a wound under you. And a big part of that wound is that BRICS as well, where ultimately they're trying to get away from that dollar. You see, but they shall not cleave to one another. The word cleave, debak, to cling. Okay, to cling, the root word, to stay close, to stick with, all right, to join, all right. Ultimately, they're not going to, be in unison in the latter days, which is what we're witnessing, the breaking up of that beast system, all right. So they're not going to cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Okay, so again, they have the power of the sword, but again, even with Turkey, they don't agree. All right, they don't agree on a whole hell of a lot. And Turkey is a big piece to the NATO military power structure. All right, but again, they have a president, all right, who's at odds with the moves NATO makes. All right, they speak up for Russia. All right, and he damn sure got a problem, all right, with America. Okay, all you have to do is a lot of meetings that they had. Okay. All right. Yeah, why Erdogan's fate matters to Biden in the U.S. Yeah, he has a history of just cursing America out. Okay. Look, Erdogan hails special relationship with Putin ahead of crucial Turkey runoff vote, and he made it.
On the eve of the first round, you told your supporters that the US president had given instructions to, quote, topple you. Do you have any evidence to suggest that the US president is meddling in these Turkish elections, that he gave instructions to topple you?
Yani Sayın Biden'ın seçilmeden önce
Mr. Biden's statement to this effect before he was elected was recorded on TV, unfortunately. And we listened to his words on TV, and we were upset. I spoke to him about it later at an international summit. And I told him that I was deeply upset by his remarks, and that I didn't expect this from him.
You called him out for calling you an autocrat in his election campaign before the US elections. That is not the same as suggesting that he is meddling in these elections and wants to topple you. Do you genuinely believe, as you suggested last Saturday, that Joe Biden wants to topple you?
ikinci tura çıkan bir insan
How could someone who is going into a runoff election instead of completing the election in the first round be a dictator? That is the reality. We have an alliance with 322 MPs in parliament, and the leader of this alliance is going to go for the runoffs in the first position. What kind of a dictator is that?
Buyurun şimdi biz ikinci tura gireceğiz.
So if re-elected, are you saying that you will work with the Biden administration? You can work with the Biden administration?
Onda hiç şüphe yok.
Without a doubt, I will work with Mr. Biden. And if Biden goes, then I will work with whoever replaces him as well.
Kim olursa olsun.
The US would like Turkey to take a stronger stance against Russia, particularly
You
with
see
regard enforcing sanctions. In April of this year, the US imposed sanctions on at least 4 Turkey-based entities it said were violating US export controls and helping Russia's war effort. President Erdogan, is Turkey helping Russia evade sanctions? And will you abide by US sanctions on Russia?
Bir defa herhangi
We
bir
have no problems with our relationship with Russia at the moment, and we
See
are
that?
not at a point where we would impose sanctions on Russia like the West have done. We are not bound by the West's sanctions. As Turkey, we are a strong state, and we have positive relations with Russia. In terms of our foreign trade volume, we've reached an ideal level with Russia. When you look at our tourism numbers, Russia is number one.
veya Ukrayna'da
Unfortunately, because of the latest statements by the main opposition party, many tourists are going to other destinations. I won't be a leader that makes the mistake of missing the tourists from Russia or Ukraine.
Yeah, basically, we make money off Russia. We got a good thing going with Russia, but we know, all right, that is a conflict of interest with the whole beast system, and that goes into Ezekiel, the 38th chapter as well. All right, and Jeremiah 50 goes into it. All right, these various different nations. Okay, you know, the region of Turkey, you know, is mentioned in the whole grand scheme of things to join hand in hand with Russia. All right, as we're witnessing this right. All right, in our day. Ezekiel 38:2, Son of man, set thy face against Gog in the land of Magog, Russia, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, all right, and prophesy against him, and say, thus said the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O God, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army and horses and horsemen, and all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. So these various different nations are aligning themselves with Russia, Persia, which is Iran, Ethiopia, Libya. Okay? All of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togomor, all right, the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. All right? Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Okay, so Russia, okay, be on the lookout, all right, for this particular relationship between Russia, because Turkey is in those regions that were mentioned, okay, in that whole the grand scheme of things in Ezekiel the 38th chapter, okay. And we always get Jeremiah the 50th chapter. Let's get that Jeremiah 50. And around, let's see here, maybe 51. Maybe 51, Salakia. Jeremiah 51 and 27, set up a standard in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations against her, call together against her the kingdoms of Ararat, which is Turkey, all right, and Mini, which is Armenia, all right, that region, that same region that was just mentioned in Ezekiel All right, the 38th chapter. All right, Meshach and Tubal. Okay, that's that same region. Okay, and Arawat, Mini, Ashkenaz, Germany. Okay, Poland, those different countries appoint a captain against her. All right, calls the horses to come up as rough caterpillars. Prepare against her the nations with the king of the Medes, which the Medes in this prophecy is speaking to Russia. Okay, because when you look at the Medes Empire, all right, it borders the region of the USSR. Okay, so these different countries are joining with Russia, the captains thereof and all the rulers thereof and all the land of his dominion. So all of these nations are joining together for the great and dreadful day. All right. So these different nations are waking up and siding with the mindset of Russia. Okay. NATO's chief alarming ultimatum to Biden, do or die against Russia. All right. To send a message to China. We'll listen to a little bit of this off of Kim Iverson.
Antiwar.com and the host of Anti-War News that you can check out on YouTube. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kim, thanks for having me.
Okay, let's first start off with this. Jan Stoltenberg coming out and saying, so he's meeting with President Biden, and he says Russia must lose in order to send a message to China. Is this really what this war is about?
Yeah, so this is, we've kind of heard this rhetoric for a while from NATO, from the U.S., that, Russia has to lose in Ukraine to send a message to, authoritarians everywhere that they can't use military force. Because, of course, the U.S. and NATO never use military force. But Stoltenberg, he was at the White House yesterday and met with Biden, and he specifically said that Russia must lose, so other countries like China, he mentioned China specifically, learn a lesson, or I guess is the idea, and he's, hinting at China's possible attack on Taiwan. And, this goes to show that NATO does increasingly have its eyes on the Asia Pacific. The North Atlantic Alliance is looking east, and there are plans right now. NATO wants to open a liaison office in Japan, which would be the first one in Asia, first NATO office in Asia. It's facing some resistance from Macron, the French president, who's been kind of resisting some of the warmongering when it comes to China. He recently said that Europe shouldn't follow the U.S. into a confrontation with China over Taiwan. And, he angered a lot of hawks in the U.S. when he said that. And apparently now he's also resisting this because he thinks the North Atlantic Alliance should stay in the North Atlantic. And they're also, NATO has plans to increase cooperation with what are considered, their four main partners in the Asia Pacific, which is Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan. And I know they also want to increase relations with India, and that's something the U.S. is doing. They're actually preparing for a visit from India's leader, Modi, and they want to increase, arms sales and military cooperation with India. So this is all part of the plan, to start building up more around China.
So do you think there's a possibility in the future where they really, truly extend NATO and they start bringing in, like Australia, South Korea, Japan, New Zealand? Do you think there's a possibility that they would do this? I mean, they said they would never expand it all the way to where they have now. So what's stopping them, right?
That's true. Yeah, I think that what's stopping them would be the resistance from Europe. I would be surprised if all the countries that have pretty good relations with China, and it's clear that the EU, a lot of countries in the EU don't want to follow the U.S. in this economic war against China that the U.S. has been launching. So I think that's what might stop it. But again, you never know, how things could change in the next few years. But I think really we might see a new kind of NATO, a PATO, a Pacific, alliance.
Well, we have
and the U.S. That's
the Australia, UK. Yeah, so they are kind of creating new alliances, but it seems like NATO is just growing into this behemoth, and they're wanting it to continue being a behemoth. And perhaps they would want to absorb other countries, and then it's just, if you're the lone country going against all of these countries in the world, it really truly would be a world war if there was something like that to break out. But what I'm curious about is what Biden's reaction was when Jan Stoltenberg, when he says we can't let Russia win, otherwise China's going to see this. I mean, was Biden like, yeah, you're right, we can't let Russia win? Do we know what his reaction was on this, or was he? Just smiling and nodding, like, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah, that's what it looked like he was doing. But, that is the rhetoric. Like I said, Biden has said similar things. And this is kind of, because there is actually a divide now in D.C. You have the ultra China hawks who actually think the U.S. should wind things down in Ukraine. And that's not really reflected by many people in Congress. For the most part, everybody's still all in on Ukraine. But from what I understand, even within the Biden administration, there is, China hawks who do think the U.S. should kind of try to put more focus on sending weapons to Taiwan and, winding down things in Ukraine. So when the defense of that is, well, no, we have to support Ukraine because it'll send a message to China that, we're united and that they can't get what they want, again, through force, through invading Taiwan. But it's just two completely different things, of course. And like I was saying, France, I think, has made clear that if something did happen, say right now, between the U.S. and China, I don't think Europe is going to come and get involved militarily The U.S. would be more on its own. And even the U.S. allies in the region, Japan and South Korea, even Australia. Australia's going along with AUKUS, but they're actually still, debating the idea of, do we actually want to go to war with China over Taiwan? They're going to kind of make it inevitable because the U.S. is building up, new military bases in Australia. That's also part of this AUKUS deal that gets Australia these submarines. So, they're heading in that direction, but not
China's
everybody wants to
countering
do
it.
this.
You're right. And the way that China's been countering it in the region, if you pay attention to the trading percentages, is that they've just been becoming the largest trading partner for all of these countries. So if they go to war with China, there's a real economic problem there for these nations. So China's been sort of outsmarting the military strategy, which is build a base, give some subs. And then China says, just trade with them to the point where they're so economically dependent on you that they couldn't possibly pick a fight with you. And that seems to be what's going on there. The United States used to be the number one trading partner for most of our allies in that region, but now it's China. Some areas like Japan, it's neck and neck. They get the same amount from the United States as they do from China, but only 10 years ago or 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. Same thing with South Korea and Australia. Taiwan, certainly China's their number one trading partner. I just have a difficult time believing that they would even want to go into a blockade type warfare with China, knowing that it would cut them off from all of their resources. Who else are they going to get them from? Especially when these other countries are like, well, we get our resources from China, so we can't then ship you the resources. We're already, it would be a very different type of war, a very different type of strategy.
Yeah, because Taiwan is probably, trying to be independent, from China. All right, Australia say that they'll help if China attacks, but it's all about control. It's all about control. This is 21 minutes. We'll listen to a little bit more, but this is all getting ready to lead to war. All right, war, woe, as the scriptures say, to the inhabitants of the earth. Okay, World War III will follow the implementation of that Wh0re. All of these things are very, very close.
Strategy over there. I'm not sure how that plays out. So I'm not sure if this is really sending China a message when it wouldn't even be a similar type of warfare. China doesn't have to step foot on Taiwan. They just have to blockade, surround. That's what they would need to do. Cut it off from the rest of the world and then get them to surrender without even stepping foot on shore. It's kind of one of those antiquated viewpoints of needing to invade. Russia and Ukraine, that's very different. You've got part of Ukraine is Russian ethnic speaking, identifying, and they were already in a civil war for 8 years with the Ukraine nationalists. Taiwan doesn't have that situation. China wouldn't need to, what's the point of invasion? When a country invades, they're doing it because they're, a lot like historically to the imperial reason, you go and you want to put your people there, you want to take the land. And it's like, so is China going to go and invade Taiwan and put a bunch of Chinese people on Taiwan who speak Chinese and eat Chinese food? Pretty sure they're already there. So I don't know. It's an odd strategy. Let's talk about the, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's an important point because it's missing from the rhetoric is just the fact that, an invasion is not in China's interest at all. And it's clearly not what they want to do. They don't want to use military action. They would
not
prefer
like that
to solve
anyway.
and blockade. And I think it did open a lot of people's eyes when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan last year and China simulated that blockade. It showed, how quick that can happen. It is right off China's coast.
They're right there, right? It would be much harder for us to go and send the subs. I mean, I know we got Philippines and Japan and South Korea, but still, you got to get over there. They're right off of China's shore. China really, the strategy there is so different. And I really think China's strategy is economic. They're just going to say, we're just going to become so important to you, more important to you than them, that you will choose us over them when the time comes. And they're patient. And so I think that's just the game. They're patient. I think what they're worried about is us striking first and putting them in a position where they have to do something. And yet the rhetoric coming from the West is, no, we're worried China's going to do something. And in the event that they invade Taiwan, we got to go do something. And I don't think the Chinese are looking at it that way. They're thinking, what if they do something first? Then we've got to counter that. But ultimately, it's a long game to them, an economic long game, economic warfare. And they're winning it at this point. So they're just staying the course. Speaking of economics, I do want to talk about the new aid. This is an arms package, more money to Ukraine.
So this could all lead to just flat out war, because particular EU, countries who have ties with the EU, or like Australia, they say, well, if China attacks Taiwan, we're gonna, so it's all leading to what we know as Armageddon, U.S. miscalculated gains, fears, losing allies, America scholar on Ukraine war. So, let me read a little bit from this. Let's see here. See here, there was a part of this I wanted to read. Second objective. Now it is very clear that the U.S. is a declining empire, and nobody And everybody's guess is that China is a rising empire. It is a very difficult moment for the Americans. The real fear in the U.S. is that we will lose our allies in Europe because of internal conflicts made worse by inflation. In fact, there are even signs of it happening in the United States, too, although it is not at the level of Europe, but it's coming. Those sanctions, messed that European economy up. Okay, gas prices went sky high. They're having to shut down particular pubs early, shortages and all of that, all because of those Joe Biden-led sanctions put on Russia. All right, it says, for example, in England, half of the working class is on strike. In France, there's a general strike called for March 8th. Here in the U.S., we do not have that level of organization or mobilization, but we have more union working class activity now than we have had in a half a century. Be very careful not to mistake the lower level of activity here for no activity at all. I was born in the United States and have lived there all my life. I have never seen this kind of agitation among the working class that I see now. It has been going on for 3 years and now it keeps building, and that goes into the scripture of Job. Give me 1 second. Job 20 and 23, when he is about to fill his belly. Hold up. I started at 22. In the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits. And he's in straits as everybody's waking up to his ass. And every hand of the wicked shall come upon him. All right, when you look up this word wicked, all right, Imal is what? The laborer. The working class is going to rise up. All right, because this place treats them like shit. Okay. It says, so finally, the expectation that the Russian military would be unequal to this task is wrong. Yada yada yada. And you can keep reading. This is where we are. Let's get the book of Revelation 17. All right. Let's see here. Let's start at 11. You just roll with it, roll down and jump around. This is Revelation 17 and 11. And the beast that was and is not, okay, he is even the eighth, all right, which is ultimately Babylon the Great, okay? It is of the seven. He's of the seven heads. The seven heads, all right, is the Greeks, the Romans, Germania Major, Germania Minor, the Spanish, the French, the British, which that's seven. And then America came out of the British. That's the eighth. All right. All right. And in prophecy, we know that the Western Roman Empire will fall, but it will be revived through the Renaissance. Okay. Which led all the way to where we are now, America. All right. So the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. All right. Rome would be revived through America. It is of the seven and goeth into perdition, goeth into destruction. All right. And the 10 horns which thou sawest, all right, the EU, the vassal states, the subordinate countries, all right, which have not received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Okay. And it goes back to the Treaty of Rome and all of these various different things that have led, all right, to this system. I'm not going to go all the way into it. All right. But this is the point. All right. We have lessons going into it. But it says, these have one mind and shall give their power to the strength and strength to the beast. So all of these countries have ultimately allied themselves to this beast system for the benefit of Babylon the Great. All right. These shall make war with the Lamb, and these different countries are going to make war with Yahushai. Okay? And the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. See? And this is what this is all going to lead to, you know, war with each other. And they're also going to fight against Yahweh, the second coming of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. All right? And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are people and multitudes and nations and tongues. All right? And America, all right, is establishing itself, you know, as the head of everything. All right, sitting in the midst of the seas, which the waters are the people. All right, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, which represent the subordinate vassal states, the EU, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. See that? And burn her with fire. So the 10 horns, all right, are going to hate the whore. And they're going to make her naked, all right, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God hath put it into their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree to give their kingdom unto the beast, unto the words of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua fulfilled. And this is just about where we are with everything that we're going into here. Okay, all of these things, all right, are leading to the beast hating the whore. And these various different alliances are being broken. Okay. And we're starting to see a push away in rebellion, okay, against the West. So that was the purpose of this lesson. Hopefully you all were edified. On to the next. Shalom.